The Game of Zen explores the often overlooked ways in which professional, personal, and spiritual growth are interrelated. We dive deep into the life teachings of the Buddha and the mindfulness practices of Zen, revealing how they can help us dramatically expand our possibilities for wholehearted work, life, and play.
Oh, and welcome to a new episode of the Game of Zen podcast. This is Scott Berman checking in from Philadelphia, PA. And how you doing, Paul? How's things in Boulder today?
Yeah, things are great. I've been actually out in the Northeast for most of the last week, Scott, out in your neck of the woods up in Connecticut. But I've been back in Boulder for a few days, and it's good to be back in Colorado. The heat dome has passed over, so it's a nice early summer time here.
Yes, and speaking of my neck of the woods, we have a special guest here. Hello, Courtney Schulnick. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Hi, Paul. Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, Courtney.
Great. So Courtney is a bunch of things. We're going to have a great conversation today. She's a litigator, a mindfulness teacher, a wife and mom of 3 boys, among many other things. So we'd love to get started by just hearing about your background and where you're from. And, we're excited.
Great. Well, I'm not too far from you. I'm right outside of Philadelphia. I lived in Philadelphia for a long time, but right before the pandemic, we sort of grew out of our home in Queen Village, Philadelphia, and we moved right over the bridge. So now I'm in Haddonfield, New Jersey.
Nice. Tell us about how you got started in mindfulness teaching and what your training and path look like.
Sure. So my experience with stress and anxiety is what actually became my path to mindfulness. I had been working together with a therapist for many years to better manage stress and anxiety. A lot of it was sort of caused by the work that I do, being a litigator, dealing with really difficult adversaries, having tough actual the caseload itself and the material that I was dealing with, sometimes difficult clients, and wanting to do everything just right. The perfectionist in me really put unnecessary stress on top of what was already inherently stressful. So that was the bulk of what really brought on anxiety in my life. So I worked together with a therapist, and as sort of I became more senior in the work that I was doing, and I got married and started a family, the demands being pulled just by the nature of the cases, and then as my responsibilities grew as a mother, trying to do it all, I found that I became more anxious and stressed out and how to balance everything. And the perfectionist or the striving to be perfect at everything, it really worked against me. So fast forward to having a young son. He was a toddler, our firstborn. In between him and our second son, I had some fertility hurdles and sort of felt out of control in a sense where I wasn't able to make everything go exactly how I wanted it to go, all the while trying to keep up with the workload. So fast forward a bit more, after several complications, we had our second son, who to this day, presently, he's the best sleeper. But for the first year of his life, I was juggling a toddler and a newborn who did not want to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I should step back a bit. All throughout the challenges that we faced before having our second son, I just kept throwing myself into my work because I sort of found that I didn't want anything to fall between the cracks, but it also was sort of like a way to numb out, to not feel the loss that I was experiencing on the fertility end of things. And so I was very imbalanced. I was working a ton. I was sort of numbed out to what was going on in my personal life. But I was very aware that when I was at home with my first son, I was thinking about what was to come. I was thinking about what had to get done with work or personal obligations. I wasn't very present for him. And then when I was back in the office, I was feeling badly about not being present. And this was all without knowing what mindfulness was at the time, but very much I could feel it within me. Fast forward to when I became pregnant with our second son, I vividly remember, this just came up for me, but I vividly remember I was probably 8 months pregnant, which you guys know, usually by that point, a woman is very much, it's evident that she's pregnant. But I remember sitting in the doctor's office with my husband saying, "Oh my gosh, we're having a baby." And he looked at me like I had 12 heads, and he's like, he thought I was kidding. He's like, "Are you, Court, I know." But I was sort of very shut down emotionally, and I think from all of the loss and the pain, I kind of just, I didn't really embrace what was here in the moment. And so enter our second son, and things got busier, and the busyness of work combined with family life, I just noticed the anxiety sort of take on a new life. It heightened. And so I still was meeting with a therapist, and she had suggested at that time that I look into what's known as the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. It's the foundational program. It's 8 weeks, and you meet once a week. This was pre-pandemic, so it was all in person. Now it's virtual and in person. But at the time when I was living in the city, it was offered at Jefferson, the Center for Mindfulness. And so I looked into it, but the thought of carving out 2.5 hours once a week for class for 8 weeks on top of what I was already juggling as a mom, as a wife, as a litigator, that just did not seem like it was something that I could fit into the sort of craziness that I was feeling at the time. So I put it off, but I went to some bookstores. I bought workbooks and books on mindfulness to get a better sense of what it's about. And I couldn't put all the books that I had, the workbooks, it was like I couldn't stop writing in the workbooks. I couldn't stop reading. It really resonated with me. And I would say my middle son was probably about a year and a half or so. And what really kind of intensified the feeling of loss and overwhelm was when our dog passed away. I think that was like, I don't know if you're pet lovers, but he sort of embodied a quality of mindfulness. He was who I turned to when I would come home, going on long walks, being out in nature, and through all the hurdles and personal challenges, he was sort of that, what became mindfulness once I learned it. He sort of embodied all of that. And so when he suddenly passed away, all of the feelings, emotions that I had been sort of stuffing down, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And the anxiety heightened even more. So I went back to the therapist who I'd been treating with, and I asked her a little bit more about the MBSR program. And that's when I decided to actually go to Jefferson and to partake in the orientation session. Elise Moss, who's the associate director there, she was the teacher, or the teacher who led the orientation. And from that moment on, I was sold. I said, this is what I need. And I was really open to it. And I think it just came, even though my life was super busy, it just, I came, or it came to me, I came to it at the right time when I most needed it. So that was my introduction. more or less. It wasn't linear. It was sort of like I dabbled and then got a little spooked by the time requirement, explored it, and then through just experience in life and really not knowing how to deal with what was very much present and speaking louder than ever, that became the incentive to want to feel better, to want to take better care of myself, and then in turn to be more present for my children, for my husband, really, I say for all the moments of my life,
Mm-hmm.
good and bad.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's an amazing path, Courtney, and there's aspects of it that just really stand out for me. I mean, the fact that you were doing all of this legal work, and you've got a full family, and you're facing fertility challenges. It's like, nobody's built for all of that, right? It's impossible almost to kind of balance. You use the word balance a few times, right?
Yeah.
So that, to experience this extreme anxiety and stress, it almost feels like natural, like that's a natural response. And to have that be the motivator, for your deep practice is where the deepest engagement with the mindfulness practice comes from, right? It's not from an intellectual sense of, oh, I think this will be good for me, but it's like I actually need this.
Yeah.
And then to have it catalyzed by the death of your pet, who was giving you something, very, very powerful and deep in terms of your heart mind, that also seems very resonant. That I think people can maybe take, to heart. It's to really get in touch with their own suffering, right?
Yeah.
To really acknowledge their own suffering, and then that can help them move into a place of practice and healing. So I guess I'm curious. My first question is, with your MBSR and your practice, do you feel you got balance in your life, or did you get something else, something deeper, something other?
Yeah. It's sort of ironic because you would think that as busy as my life was, because here I had one son who was 4 years old or so and a 1-year-old, juggling a full caseload. And then I'm adding this MBSR program on top of it, which, by the way, towards the tail end of the program, embedded in the program, is a 1-day silent meditation retreat. So like the thought of giving up one of my weekend days and not working all day, like it just went against everything that I was so used to as a working attorney. But on one level, my life became busier, so it felt a little unbalanced, little less balanced in terms of, okay, I'm away from my family more. I was at the time, our office was in Rittenhouse Square area, which, Paul, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but Center City. And we were living in Queen Village, so I would leave the office and go to take the MBSR program at night. So one night a week, I was getting home pretty late, have a very patient and understanding husband who was tending to the kids and whatnot around the house. But the program, even from a time perspective, even though it was a little bit there wasn't as much balance as there was before with me being accessible after work on those nights, I started to notice a shift in the way that I was perceiving the stressors in my life, the way that I was allowing myself to feel more. And so again, maybe it was more imbalanced because I was feeling more and I was actually leaning into more and aware of so much more rather than just stuffing it down. But the ability to be aware of that and then to be more compassionate with myself, to stop judging myself, what felt like 24/7, like just beating up on myself for feeling like I wasn't doing a good enough job at work, or maybe, when I was at work feeling like, oh, I'm missing something with one of the kids, or I didn't do this the right way, or the house is a mess. We just, as parents, as professionals, I think we're so hard on ourselves and something has to give. And so from a time perspective, from a feeling perspective, like it wasn't exactly even. I was feeling more. I was spending more time practicing mindfulness, but it brought so much more balance into my world. So I say it's sort of a catch-22, but I think there was another part to your question, like something to the effect, like, what did it open, or what did it offer you? Something to that effect. But I would just say that for those 8 weeks, for the time that I put into the program, for my commitment to home practice and to really showing up for myself, I can't even put a number on what a gift, like how many ways it's been a gift in my life, and how in turn it's allowed me to not only show up for myself in the moments of my lives, but to show up for others, whether it's my kids, whether it's my clients, whether it's other family members or friends. It's just something that keeps growing, and it's something that is innate. It's always here. So that's the great thing, that we can always come back to it. And I just find it as sort of like a safe haven, something that, even though I love yoga, like before, when I would be feeling overwhelmed and I'd say, I have to get to a class, I have to get out of here, I have to get out of this deposition, I have to get out of this loud house, and I have to get into downward dog. Like, you don't have to escape anything. You can very much just be with it and feel what's here and find ways to support yourself with what is here.
I think what's impressive about your story too is that you had inherently difficult things happening, and being a lawyer is not easy. Being a mom of little kids is not easy, and you're always worried about the future. You know, when you're in a legal situation, like what's going to happen with this case or that.
Exactly.
And same thing with the kids. Like, you know, am I prepared for tomorrow's school or whatever? So it's like it's naturally unmindful. You know, it's like you're always thinking about something in the past or the future. But it sounds like through the training, you started to little by little train yourself to be more present, and then things improve from there. So
yeah, and I think I mentioned sort of my path to mindfulness wasn't linear exactly, and I think the practice itself, like I find that I could be a little bit judgmental still. Like, I mean, it's just human condition, but even my own practice, I'll judge it like that was a good sit, or that was a good meditation, but it dips and dives, and so it's not always linear. But for the most part, just in the 8-week program, just that time period alone, to see how I could really get out of my own way, and to be able to recognize, like, oh, I'm telling myself this. Like you mentioned, Scott, we worry as lawyers about what's to come. Like, just how my mind would go to total negativity, assuming I'm going to mess up at trial, or I'm going to forget about this deadline. Like, our minds are sort of hardwired for that. And when we can recognize that and not have to like buy into it, that alone, just like in the professional sector for me, in the work that I do, was so freeing. And then taking it the other way, like as a parent, again, that striving to be the best parent you can be, not wanting to mess up. Like, when we can sort of see all this and almost laugh, like smile at just how rigid we are with ourselves. Like, for me, like, to be able to see some of my patterns, not just with work, but not just as a parent, but life generally, like, that is what can help us to feel more freedom, as opposed to boxing ourselves up as good or bad, right or wrong. So it really helped me to, I think I mentioned this, to get out of my own way and to not have to have everything be just so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're bringing out something so important here, which is the way in which our ideas about how things should be or need to be are at the source of all of our anxiety and suffering, right? Our
Yeah.
offness, if you will. It's that idea. And even the way you answered that question about balance was right at the heart of that, because what I heard was, you know, you you didn't become more balanced in the way that you thought balance was supposed to be. You
Yeah.
know, we have this idea of what balance is supposed to be. And that includes, well, you're good at everything and you're handling everything and you're responsive and you're able to juggle everything really well. That's how I'm supposed to be.
Right.
But actually, when you crash and you realize, no, it's only what I can bring forward, that's where it's really more being centered, that
Yeah.
the balance, you know, whatever balance the balance is almost secondary. It's being centered in
Yeah.
yourself. That's most the real fruit, right, of
Yeah.
doing a mindfulness practice. Yeah. So I'm really curious about like how you work with lawyers specifically,
Mhm.
because as you say, they're I think they're really driven by the ideas of what they're supposed to do and what they're supposed to say. It's a very verbally oriented profession, right? It's all
Yeah.
about words, right? The laws are written in words, they're
Yeah.
interpreted in words, you're making your case in words.
Yeah.
And you know, as we know, as meditation and mindfulness practitioners, we're really getting away from that level of consciousness, and we're stepping away from the way that level of consciousness to go into a more spacious nonverbal place, a more sensorially rich place,
Mhm.
and to be resourced from that place. So I've always found, and I've worked with a lot of lawyers in my coaching practice, they are especially afflicted with this mind that's so attached to words, and
Yeah.
there's so much anxiety and stress there, and they're so challenged to do any sort of mindfulness or meditation practice. So I'm curious how you work with them to help them, you know, work with that.
Yeah. Well, I will say out of all of the different groups, the high achievers, professionals, individuals who I work together with, lawyers are a bit skeptical of this work. They
Yeah.
may like, and it's not an age thing, but I will say some of the younger attorneys tend to be a little bit more open. Like you have the attorneys who are fresh out of law school, they may be more curious about it, which it's one of the attitudes that we can cultivate with this practice. Some of the more, I'll say, seasoned attorneys, they think it's like hippy dippy. What is Courtney doing? Is she sitting in lotus pose? Is she, burning incense? Like they have like a certain image. And so when you can show attorneys scientific research that really backs the benefits of these practices, I think you can at least get their attention. Like you plant a seed. In my case, some of the people who I worked closely with at the firm, I think they noticed a difference in how I was communicating, in how I was looking, like smiling, and just my demeanor. I think that they were like, "What is she doing? I want to know more about this. What's she eating?" That type of thing. But so 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 lawyers, generally speaking, can be a bit skeptical about this work. And from a time perspective, we're so strapped for time. I think as a society, we're such busy people, but time is a concern. So I try to help them look at mindfulness practice, whether they're doing a program or a drop-in session, as not another item on our to-do list, but something that is a really deep practice of self-care, one that's going to help you to be more present, to step out of reactivity, and to show up more fully for your work, for your clients, for your colleagues. And then the third, I mean, there's so many, but to get back to your question, as attorneys, we're so in our heads. Like we're constantly strategizing, we're resolving really difficult issues for our clients. And the mind doesn't stop. And I think we're so conditioned to be up in our heads, so to speak, that we numb out in a way, like we're not even aware that we're within a body. So when I offer a practice to a group, like a room full of 100 attorneys, and I do something like a body scan, or just feeling the breath, like coming down, tension come down for our heads and like into the body, even just feeling the body making contact with the chair without having to like figure anything out. Because a lot of times, then the mind's going, well, how is this here? And what's happening here? Like just opening up to the direct experience of feeling the breath or noticing sensations. When we can let attention rest on sensations within the body as opposed to having to constantly fix or resolve within the head, like there's a sense of ease and just feeling relaxed, like an attorney who is, and myself included, like when we're just so tight in the body because we're experiencing a lot of stress or anxiety, when we can just let go, when we can just feel into the body and invite a little bit of ease, it just feels wonderful in the body. It can open our minds. We can feel clearer in our minds. And then when we go back to the next part of our day, like seeing how it can really improve how we feel, how we communicate, it can make all the difference, I say, in just when we don't give ourselves the moments to step away from all the doing, we fall into reactivity, and you can push send like on an email and be like, oh my gosh, what did I just send that other attorney? Or what did I just write my adjuster? But when you just give yourself moments to feel into the body, to just be as opposed to constantly do, it's amazing what possibilities it opens us up to. But half the battle is just giving ourselves permission to just be.
Yeah.
One of the I think it's John Kabat-Zinn who is the pioneer of the mindfulness based. I mean, I know he's the pioneer, but I think this is who said the quote I'm about to share. But John Kabat-Zinn, who created the mindfulness based stress reduction program, says that even though we're human beings, we're more like human doings. And I think that can't be any truer for attorneys. Like we're just constantly doing.
Yeah, I was thinking about everyone has that experience when you hit send, and a lawyer once told me that the E in email stands for evidence. So,
Yes.
so just remember that every time you hit send.
No, that's exactly one of the partners at my firm who trained me early on said, imagine anything that you send out into the universe. Imagine if you were in court in trial and that was blown up, shown to a jury. And that's really stuck with me. That's not to say that I still don't fall into reactivity and hit send. And I'm like, oh, what did I just do? But when we can take moments to pause, like it can make all the difference in the next part of our day, week, month, life.
I think it makes a huge difference. So I'm curious about your transition from one of the beautiful things about the practice I found is that the more I've studied and the longer I spend talking to Paul and get more of it down myself, the more I'm able to help other people in some way. And it could be my kids, it could be work, it could be through doing the podcast. So I'm curious about your transition of you went through the training, you started to get good at it, you felt the benefits of it. How did you then transition into teaching others?
Yeah, great question. So one of my colleagues at the time, when I had just completed the MBSR program, and I was sharing with him how much it was benefiting me. He did not practice meditation or mindfulness, but he was interested in just from what I was sharing, what it was about. And he said, why don't you give like a lunch and learn to the firm? I think that you would have a lot of people show up. And I did that. I spoke with the gentleman who's in charge of CLEs, which are continuing legal education classes. And we put together a 1-hour workshop, and the response to it was overwhelming. People for months were just, whether it was an email from a senior partner or a young associate or somebody coming by my door just saying, thank you so much. That made all the difference. I'm still practicing the relaxing sighs exercise that you taught us. It really encouraged me to deepen my own practice, but to also feel more confident that I could kind of take the show on the road, so to speak. So I went back to Jefferson, the Center for Mindfulness, and they have a teaching practicum. So I enrolled in the teaching practicum, and then I interned with Elise Moss and co-taught with her the MBSR program. I think I retook the MBSR program like 5 times after that. I learned something new every time, but I took it for not just to become a stronger teacher, but just there's so much value in when you go back and you see something from a different perspective. I just kept learning, and I had such an interest in it. So I met with Elise to create a 6-week program that I thought would be more attractive in some ways to a busy professional who maybe can't, like, wants to learn these practices, but can't commit necessarily at a certain time to the MBSR. But we designed an abbreviated program that's derived from the MBSR curriculum. And I just started pitching it to different companies and firms and businesses in and around the Philadelphia area. And it really took off. Then came the pandemic. And I think that in some ways, people opened up to these practices even more. And we were spending a lot of time at home. So I offered it through remote means, and it just grew. I continued with my practice and was in constant communication with the team at Jefferson. And during the pandemic, they welcomed me to join the team. So in addition to my own personal practice and then starting my own mindfulness business, I joined the team of Jefferson teachers at the Center for Mindfulness. And so I teach the MBSR program, as well as they have graduate level courses at Jefferson, and continue with one-on-one people who want to work with me one-on-one, and the 6-week programs and drop-in sessions. So it as much as I feel like these practices that I teach help others, it's a symbiotic relationship, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so helpful for me, and in return, I love in some way teaching others these tools that are within each of us, but teaching them how to strengthen them and how to be more present for the moments of their lives.
Mm-hmm. And you just answered this a bit in what you just said, but I want to invite you to expand on it. I'm curious whether you're how you feel with respect to this shift professionally. You know, does this feel like more fulfilling work to be doing versus doing the lawyering work? And also, how is it helping you in your own family life with that busy family life and the kids? Yeah. And is there a opening there as well?
Okay, there's a lot of questions there. So I'm going to make sure I tackle all of them. So fulfillment. So I want to say compassion for, like, I can, just being a lawyer, like the not the person who's involved in the suit, I get anxious. Like, I feel there's a certain amount, like we call it empathetic distress. Like, sometimes as attorneys, we take on what our clients are feeling.
Yeah.
And through my practice and the ability to really sense into what's coming up for me, in turn, it brings me a lot of joy to be able to kind of like hold my clients' hands and guide them through the process. It can be a really daunting process. So that brings me a lot of fulfillment. What can be really difficult, especially in the work that, I don't want to call it work, but in the practice of mindfulness, where we're really cultivating these feel-good qualities like kindness, compassion, openness, non-judging. Sometimes when you're dealing with a difficult adversary, they can bring on unnecessary, I say, suffering. Like, they make something that's already pretty difficult, like the work itself can be challenging. But that being said, there's even more momentum to keep at it, like to bring mindfulness into those moments when I find myself struggling with a difficult person in one of the cases. So I wouldn't say it's sort of like full circle. Like mindfulness comes into the work that I do as a litigator, but there are definitely parts to litigation that really don't have a role in mindfulness. So in some respect, when I'm in a room full of participants for a workshop and we're all sort of aligned with, like, no one's out to get anyone, no one's out to win, but we're sort of in it together, like that resonates more with, that kind of aligns with my values. So, but these practices are so important to me. I think it's important for me to still be in it, like as a litigator, to be able to feel, like to be able to relate to what my peers, my colleagues are going through. I think that is what allows me to help them more. So the two are kind of complementary. I wouldn't say pick one over the other. I think together they make me who I am and help me to offer more to the people that I try to help. There was a third question. There was sort of like three questions.
The family.
The family. So the family, we laugh because my husband does not meditate. He does not. I mean, he's a huge supporter of this work that I do. And I keep calling it work. I don't want to call it work because it's not like there's efforting. But he knows that the time. He knows how passionate I am about not only my personal practice, but about getting this out into the universe as far and as wide as possible. But it's not for him, he says. He goes to the gym and he lifts weights or he goes for a run. And we laugh because everything just kind of rolls off his back. And here I am sitting, like, not for hours, but I offer a lot of workshops. I teach the MBSR, and something could go wrong and I'll just become totally reactive. And all three kids and my husband look at me. It's like, who's the mindfulness teacher in this house? But no, I'm human. There's definitely moments where I feel some reactivity, but on a whole, it's allowed me to become, or to be, not become, but to be a better mom, to really be present. If I'm reading a book to my 7-year-old before bed, like, am I really there reading the book? Am I checking my cell phone? Am I scrolling? Like, it's helped me to notice when maybe I'm a bit disconnected, and then to choose to be here for my other son's baseball game, my other son's basketball game, or just making them dinner, or seeing all the pile up of dishes. I could choose to complain, or I could be like, okay, let's just be with it. Like, it's changed how I relate to myself, how I relate to them, the sort of things that come along with being a wife or a mother, and really just appreciating what's here when we.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying there's definitely moments where I'm like, oh, like, look at all the laundry. Like, I'm not excited about those things, but on a whole, I think it's just made my life so much more enjoyable, and I feel that much more gratitude for what it is I have, as opposed to what how I think it should be or what I don't have.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I find as a parent, one thing when I started to get into this, my kids are getting older and they're not around as much. And so the mindfulness helps me be present more when I'm with them. I'm not there. They're not there every day. So it's really helped me focus on what's going on in their lives. And really, it's really a great thing, I think, is just being more present for your kids. It's really a gift to them and yourself.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to get distracted by work, but like, the better you are at that, the better they're going to respond to you as a parent.
Yeah. And I agree. Being present, I think, you said being present for them and for yourself, but also cutting ourselves some slack.
Yeah.
Like, I think we're just real. I know I am. I have a 14-year-old, and that's a whole different ballpark than my 10 or my 7-year-old, and like wanting to be the cool parent or, not wanting to miss something. But when we can just give ourselves a break, I think it's a gift to ourselves, but a gift to everybody.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I also think I wanted to bring up the fact that this is not hard, okay? This
Yeah.
takes practice and it does take teachers. So I appreciate what both of you do. But everyone can do it. And I think it must be great for you guys also as teachers when you bring this up and you teach it and you see something shift in someone's thinking. And it must be very rewarding when you're working with someone, whether it's a lawyer or someone else, that you've taught them something and then they get it and things change. So how is that feeling for you?
So that you're asking me to make sure I'm not jumping in on top
Oh,
of in what Paul wanted to say, but so we just finished up an MBSR course at Jefferson about a month or so ago, and the last class, the participants and the teachers have an opportunity to just share what's coming up for ourselves, and it's amazing to watch. And this is through Zoom, so we weren't in person, but to just see in a group setting, everyone comes with their own stressors. They're grappling with different things, whether it's anxiety, whether it's stress, whether it's some type of physical illness. Everybody is coming for their unique reasons, but you can see that we're all in this together, and that through the program, they sense that they learn and grow from one another, not just from the teachers, but from each other. And what you hear someone share day one, where they can't, it's so hard for them to even share their present moment experience. And then you get to week 8 and they're just chatting away and they're smiling. I mean, it's
nice.
palpable. You can feel it. And so to know that you in some way contributed or helped them to strengthen what's already, like you said, Scott, is already within each of us. They're all inner resources that we have, but we can learn ways to strengthen them and find ways to support ourselves. When you can see the shift in people, it's just, I sometimes think like I should be paying them. Like it's really rewarding. And this past class, it didn't happen a lot, but they were happy tears. But I literally had to like wipe away a few tears because I was so happy for
Nice.
everyone. So it's very rewarding. And as much as they're learning and growing from what we teach and from what they experience from the others in the group, I'm learning and growing just as much, if not more. So it's really a beautiful thing.
I'm really appreciating, Courtney, how you're teaching the essence of mindfulness and you're practicing and manifesting the essence of mindfulness, which isn't about becoming calm, right? I think people just have a lot of ideas about that. It's about becoming non-reactive and becoming calm. And it's not about that at all. It's more about becoming whole, right? It's accepting everything in your life, allowing it to be, right, to be that way. And that's where the balance comes from. That's where the responsiveness comes from. That's where the connection comes from. That's where the calm, it does make you calm, but it comes from that inclusiveness. And that's what Scott, you mentioned the simplicity, right? It's the simplicity of just being with yourself and allowing whatever is manifesting to manifest. You said something at the beginning of our conversation, which was, so important, is permission, right? Giving ourselves permission to feel, to make mistakes, to be sloppy, to be messy.
Yeah.
That's where that's what mindfulness is really based in, are those feelings. But it's those ideas of perfectionism and don't fuck upness, and things have to be a certain way. You have to be a certain way. I have to be a certain way. Things have to develop. That just is, it's almost an aggression, right, against reality, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then going back to lawyers, I think we strive so much to get particular outcomes, like we want to win and we want to do a good job. And it doesn't mean with this practice, like some people think, well, if I'm not so high strung and stressed out, am I going to start being complacent and not getting good results? It's not about that. But again, we do a better job when we're feeling centered, when we feel whole, when we feel connected to ourselves, connected to the moments of our lives. We can get a sense of clarity. And so it's more about allowing what's here with rather than, having to have things be a certain way. When we can just allow our experiences to be as they are, then we open ourselves up to greater freedom. So I like that, just putting that out there, that we're not, while these practices can help us to feel more relaxed and we can feel more at ease, it's not about that, but feeling more whole and really being aware of the present moment.
Yeah. I also think the older you get, it gets better and better too, because everything changes all the time. We did an episode on impermanence a while ago, and the things that I apply mindfulness to change all the time, and I'm getting better little by little all the time. So I think it's a constant thing. We're always working on ourselves, and the more that we do that, the more we can encourage other people to do the same, and don't get stuck in your ways.
You just made me feel so much better, because all these years, I'm 47, I'll put that out there, and I haven't needed glasses, and getting older and trying to be less, be more mindful and less resistant to it, because it's a new, I bring that like beginner's mind to what's this needing glasses thing about. So thanks for saying it gets better as we get older, Scott.
Yes, it does. Not everything, but most things do.
Yeah.
We get smarter and we learn more, and we, can apply it better.
Yeah. And those things accelerate, Courtney. So you're welcome to a new phase of learning.
It's just, I say life is our laboratory for mindfulness. So more opportunity to practice being mindful with what is. So.
Yeah.
Kurt, I do have a kind of a cheeky question for you, because we're talking about, disengaging from the adversarial and from that stress. I'm curious whether you have any anecdotal or even, scientific data around lawyers who do practice mindfulness. Do they have better outcomes? And maybe there's just positive outcomes, meaning they win their case or they do better in the case, but then there's also would be subjective outcomes in terms of their own, well-being in their job. Do you have anything around that?
I don't have any research in front of me that I can give you like hard data with percentages, but I will say, just based on my experience of having worked together with hundreds of lawyers, that when we can step out of reactivity, when we can notice, striving to have things be a certain way, when we can really be present for each moment, well, just by being present for this moment, as opposed to getting so pigeonholed and having to get a certain outcome or beating ourselves up for where we think we went wrong in a past case, when we can be in the present moment, that's what allows us to get optimal outcomes. And people experience that. People come back and say, I was able to notice during, whether they were in trial or maybe a contentious deposition, and they noticed the adversary there was just a lot of animosity, and then the person who's sharing with me is saying they were getting really fired up. Well, you can kind of change the dance. You don't have to feed in, like add more fuel to the fire. And when you can just sort of notice what's coming up for you, both in the mind and the body, invite yourself to relax, you can open to like the bigger picture. You don't have to buy into the way the other side is acting, but you can choose how to wisely respond in that moment. And the ability to make wise choices in the present moment, that's going to ultimately affect what's going to happen in the end.
That is beautiful.
Or the next moment, not the end even. But I don't have any hard data with me. I'm sure I can find something. That's one of the areas that's really exciting to me right now, the intersection between mindfulness neuroscience and sort of finding out and the data that supports that these practices really do affect, how we feel and sort of what's going on from, the landscape of the brain. Like there's so many ways that we can show this with scientific research, but I can just tell you from my own personal experience in working with attorneys that's what they share with me.
I know a bunch of lawyers in the Philly area that should be talking to you for sure.
Send them my way.
So, Courtney, Schulnick, mindfulness.com. Anybody that's listening, I think there's a lot of people in our town actually that could use a lot of this training for sure.
There are a lot of attorneys in Philadelphia, so
for sure.
I welcome. I'd say the more people who practice this within the legal community alone, what a difference it could make in the practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about how to reach you and how to sign up and get in touch.
Sure. So I have a website. It's Courtney Schulnick, mindfulness.com. And you can visit the website to learn more about what mindfulness is. There are a bunch of different resources from guided meditations, both video, audio. There is information about different types of courses that I offer, one-on-one opportunities. And each week I offer a free 15-minute drop-in session on Thursdays, 4 to 4:15 Eastern Time. Then through Jefferson, I also offer, myself and Elise Moss, we offer a 15-minute drop-in each Tuesday, 12:30 to 12:45 on behalf of the Center for Mindfulness. So if people want to find ways to practice mindfulness in the middle of the day, this is a really nice and supportive way to do that. Through LinkedIn, if people want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm constantly posting articles, newsletters, sort of uplifting quotes and studies from other meditation teachers. So that's a great way to find out what I'm offering, but also interesting information that other meditation teachers may be offering. And then you can email me as well. So my email, you can reach it through the Connect Me page on my website. And I'm happy to set up a Zoom call or a telephone call just to get a better understanding of what it is an organization or an individual is looking to obtain through mindfulness practice.
Fantastic. Well, this has been really awesome, Courtney. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Really appreciate it. Paul, any final thoughts?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, it's been really great chatting with you, Courtney.
Likewise.
Fantastic. And thanks everyone for listening. As usual, you can sign up for the Zen at Work newsletter and contact Paul for his coaching. And certainly check out Courtney and Courtney Schulnick, mindfulness.com. Thank you so much. And we'll tune in next time for a new episode of The Game of Zen.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration into Zen Buddhism and its transformative influence on work and life. We hope you'll subscribe, share, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. May your journey be one of continuous growth and mindful living. From all of us here at Game of Zen, wishing you peace and prosperity on your path ahead.